Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me to this beautiful part of the world. I haven't been here for many years, and it's, even despite the weather, it's just as beautiful as ever. And tomorrow I hope to see it properly without the clouds around, so I'm really looking forward to that. Great to talk to you about K2Fly today, and I'm going to do what everybody else does and pay a lot of attention to the disclaimer. I could spend minutes on that, but you probably don't want me to, and we'll get into it. K2Fly is, so some basics, K2Fly is a software vendor, so we're an ASX-listed provider of enterprise-grade SaaS solutions to, at this point in time, the biggest mining companies in the world, and we'll get into that in a bit later. We are a very purpose-driven company. A lot of the people such as myself have been working in the mining industry for many, many years and have worked for the big mining companies. But we see our role is actually to help the mining industry find a way through the current expectations that they're being forced upon them through the extra demands in and around environmental, social and governance requirements. And those things are entirely justified. The mining industry suffers from a bit of a deficit of trust, unfortunately. And to that extent, I'll probably, given it's a Friday afternoon, and I'm not going to let you all sit there and fall asleep, so I'm going to get you involved in a little quick pop quiz, all right? And this is where the people at the back of the room are probably thinking, thank God I sat back here, but it's all right. It's not about being front or middle or back. Just a quick survey. Who's heard of Briex, the company Briex out of Canada? Okay, so who in this room invests directly in mining stocks? So you've probably heard of JORC, for instance. The JORC code? Yep. So the JORC code and many other codes came from the Briex disaster, where they might have been a little cavalier with the truth about what their drilling results were, insulted the results, and basically nearly brought down the whole Toronto Stock Exchange because of the fluctuations in that stock. And that created a whole raft of regulation around the world about how you report and disclose mining, your resources and reserve, your inventory, so to speak. Next one, who's heard of Brumadinho and the tragedy that occurred there in not much less? So Vale had a dam in Brumadinho in South America. The tailings dam failed, tragically killing 275 people in seconds, literally, and wiping out whole villages and communities and incredible destruction to the environment. Probably more close to home, who's heard of Juukan Gorge? All right. So, most of you know what happened with Rio Tinto in the Juukan Gorge, the destruction of priceless cultural heritage. So the reason I'm bringing up those things is because in 10 minutes it's really hard to describe what we do, all right? But the reason I wanted to explain those things to you is that we work directly and we provide software solutions that prevent those things happening, prevent the loss of life, prevent the destruction of communities, and allow the mining companies to talk about their story in a much more constructive way, rather than having to defend those sorts of terrible things. I'm sure that you all read the newspapers and you hear every day about environmental, social, governance things, but in terms of the mining industry, which we predominantly serve, not exclusively, and from the big four, ESG is just all over the top risks that are being faced by mining companies today at the executive and board level. It's a risk issue. To that extent, we have tremendous tailwinds at the moment in terms of the exposure that this space is getting in terms of from financiers, from insurers, from shareholders such as yourself that demand radical transparency, and ratings agents, you name it. So they're sort of playing off the helmet, so to speak, in how they cope with this enormous demand for these sorts of things. I'm not going to go through all of those in detail, but you can see that we play a role in each of those spaces, and I'm going to get more specific about that now. We are a first mover in a space that we're calling resource governance. So we work not just in the resources industry, although that's a focus for us now, but we believe that all resources are precious, and all resources belong to all of us, and all resources should be managed and sustained properly, and therefore you should be able to disclose what it is you're doing with that land in particular, and those resources to your investors and to the communities that you operate in. So that's a big part of what we've got. So that's transparency, or what's being called radical transparency. So most systems aren't set up for that at the moment. So what we're doing a lot of, we have very little competition in this space, and we're largely replacing outdated systems that aren't set up or created in order to solve that problem. So we're replacing outdated operational systems, but more, and then on top of that, providing the governance and disclosure that the community and the investors require in order for them to make an educated investment decision on that company. So it's not just about the resources in the ground anymore, it's about what your programs are in and around how you manage that ESG risk. I'm sure Stuart could talk about that at length as well. He's just been through the whole permitting process, so that's the journey that you've been on, right? So in that respect, the other big issue here, when we see organisations like BlackRock and the massive demand that we see for battery minerals, but also the traditional things like steel, even gold. But we're going to need copper. We need all this material in order to transition to the new economy and to transition away from carbon fuels, etc. That requires a huge amount of mining. So I want to make it really clear, we're from the mining industry, so we're not anti-mining, we're actually here to facilitate that growth in those mining operations. And a big problem, so what you're seeing is the demand is spiking for mining, for more mining, to fuel all this stuff, but the permitting process and the regulation and the disclosure requirements are growing exponentially at the same time, which is slowing down the actual ability for those organisations like BlackRock to be able to get into the market, and they've done a great job, so congratulations on that. But obviously you've got this dissonance happening in the industry. So our job is to speed up that permitting process. Also, if you're operating on land and you're not doing a good job of managing those stakeholders, etc., you're not going to get invited back. It's as simple as that. So you have to really manage that process really, really well. And as I said, adherence to increased regulatory requirements, some of which are regulatory in nature, a la ASIC, ASX, etc., but increasingly they're actually community demands. If you think about Juukan Gorge in WA, Rio Tinto didn't actually break a law there, but they crossed a community line. The difference is the same. Well, there's no difference essentially in the outcome of that event. And that's the same with the tailings disasters that we've seen around the world and the sort of regulation that's been self-imposed by the industry to look after that. So, sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? I hope. But let's put that together with what validates this is the biggest mining companies in the world are spending money and contracting with K2Fly. We've done this really, really quickly. So in the last 3 years, since 2019, we started to build this extraordinary customer list. And you can see, obviously, the customers at the top. We talk about the big five, being Rio, Glencore, BHP, Anglo American, and Vale, who aren't on that list just yet. Watch this space. And then all of the names that you can see across all of the commodity groups. The big ones, iron ore, gold, and obviously increasingly, copper has always been there, but increasingly the battery minerals we're doing more and more business with. Down the bottom are the 9 solutions that we offer to those organisations. Now, I want to make it really, really clear that when we say we've got Rio Tinto as a customer, Rio Tinto use 4 or 5 of our solutions, but we're really just at the beginning of these. All of these customers are contracted with us currently, but they're not all using all of those things. So the white space for us is that the first bill?
That's the first bill.
is huge. So I just wanted to also point out that this is a global business. So we're based in Perth, a good place to be if you're in mining technology. 60% of our business comes out of Australia, but 40% of our business is coming from offshore, 20% in the Americas, and 20% out of Europe. In fact, Europe's actually a big growth spot for us, which is a bit of a surprise to us. Whoops, pardon me. So just to sort of put that into context and what makes us very, very different, and if you go back to the pop quiz, the resource disclosure is our most successful solution. And I think 18 of our 26 customers use that globally. But the importance of that in terms of trust, if you cannot report your inventory to the stock market reliably and confidently, if you're suffering from a lack of trust, that's the first place where it's going to go wrong. And that comes with enormous consequences in terms of value. And traditionally, that's the way that mining companies were valued. Tonnes grade times prevailing price of the day was very simple mineral economics, and that drove the value of your business. Now, increasingly, as you move across the spectrum there from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, which is not all of our solutions, but a number of the things we do, those things can degrade your value instantly. So if you're not managing those things properly, then you are putting yourself enormously at risk as a mining company in terms of how you're valued and again, the trust and your ability to go forward. So that is just growing and growing and growing. So we enter often through that resource disclosure, which is at a board executive level. So that goes into the annual report. Our numbers are going into those annual reports. And then that gives us a position at corporate that we can expand across these other corporate ESG risks.